This is Robert Clinkybeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing business content from accomplished leaders to bring you value, scale your business, and better yourself personally. We hope you really enjoy the show, and I encourage you to share with your network so they can subscribe and we can expand these messages globally. We are also super excited to be supported by two brilliant sponsors. If you're tired of measuring properties, Site Recon platform fully automates measurements so you can focus on sales. So think measurements, think Site Recon. The other sponsor is Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Company Cam brings documentation, communication, and liability protection together in one simple, easy to use app for you and your entire team. Company Cam is the only app every landscaper needs. Check it out. Hi, this is Robert Clinkybeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. I am really excited today to be joined by Gregoire. Greg is a certified conscious capitalism consultant. So welcome, Ken.
Hey, it's great to be here, Robert. I'm really looking forward to today.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming along. So, I think the first question I need to start off with, just mainly for a lot of my audience, what is conscious capitalism?
Yeah, that's, it's certainly near and dear to my heart. Conscious capitalism was founded on the belief that the very laws of capitalism are what can be used to right our system. Right now we're facing so many challenges, whether they be societal issues, environmental issues, climate change. As it turns out, capitalism is the most powerful engine. It's extremely scalable and sustainable to address those challenges. And, what an amazing time to be an entrepreneur. There are 4 principles around it. Might be interesting to spend just maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds on them.
Yeah.
The first one is higher purpose. We certainly today, more and more people are looking for greater meaning in their life and purpose. But as it turns out, in conscious capitalism, it's a much deeper purpose. What we're looking for here is, what problem are we really solving in society as a result of our organization? And we can talk more about that if you want to ask questions. But the other one is stakeholder management. I love stakeholder management because, the traditional model of capitalism, what's turned into traditional model over the past 30 years, it's really focused on the shareholder as a key stakeholder and focus on earnings and, how is the quarter going and what can we do to make next quarter better? And certainly those are great things. The difference between stakeholder capitalism is engaging, interconnecting, collaborating in a very symbiotic relationship to create new value. So lots of things there. I was thinking about something this morning, maybe we can get to later, and I haven't thought long enough to think about what COVID might have looked like if companies were all conscious. And it's kind of got me fired up a little bit. So
Cool.
I'd definitely be on the hot spot with that conversation. I haven't gone very far, but I know it would be different.
Yeah.
So conscious leadership is another. First thing about conscious leadership, it's about knowing ourselves so well. And, that's an ongoing thing. But the other aspect of conscious leadership is for CEOs around the world. The number one thing we can be doing when we jump into a meeting or simply walking in the woods is to be thinking about what value are we going to bring to our company today to live its purpose. And then caring culture. In the old days, and still even many companies today, think the perks are what keep employees there, and it's not. And they'll oftentimes really refer to, well, I have a great culture. What employees really want to know is, are they cared about? Is it a trusting environment? Is it a place in which doesn't matter what's going on in their life? Does the organization care about them? In fact, they might even be having challenges performing. If you can distinguish care from performance, wow, what a change in culture. Yeah. So when you take a look at the combination of those 4, which is very important to understand, they're all interconnected. They don't operate independently. The idea is that you get a triple bottom line, and the 3 Ps, profit, people, and planet, they all benefit.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we're going to dive into all of those here in a second, but we've known each other for several years now. You're a serial entrepreneur. senior leader within EO. I mean, you've got a sort of endless resume here. So just go into that a little bit, and also just about your whole journey that brought you to conscious capitalism.
Sure. Well, as an entrepreneur, I've had the great fortune of founding and leading companies in many different industries. Very exciting time. And then in 2005, well, I still had some companies. I started working with other entrepreneurs. They were seeking me out, and it created the opportunity for me to learn. I want to go way back. I mean, way back for a moment, not childhood, but close. I had a company highly successful on the shore of Lake Champlain, employing lots of people, high-end jobs, flying around the world, and business was amazing, and I was chasing the money. My dad was an extraordinary entrepreneur. In fact, still today, people remember him and his business, and he'd be well in his 90s. He approached me one day and said, you're just not focused on the right things in your business. You're not treating people with care, one of the words he really used frequently, and you've just lost it in terms of values. Things aren't working. And so that started to set me up I had to think differently. But I really didn't catch on for a lot of years. And I was starting to really grapple with, how am I going to really lead a company with care? And all the things that my father shared with me, I didn't know how to do it. So I started stumbling around, and eventually, many years later, I came across conscious capitalism. I attended my first CEO summit, and there I'm with entrepreneurs and CEOs of $10 million company and up, billion-dollar company, but a lot in the 10 to 50 million range. And I began to see that, in fact, there might be a path. Shortly after that is when I participated in the program to become a certified conscious capitalism consultant. And it was pretty exciting at the time, becoming the 7th person to be certified and actually beginning to understand how to address the challenges companies are facing from a higher conscious point of view.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I really value your journey. I mean, do you think that conference was the pivotal moment in that time, or was there something around that really just, that light bulb finally came on and almost you thought back about what your father was saying to you?
Yeah, it actually was the conference, although I'll tell you more recently, I continue to think of my father almost 2 and 3 times a day. Huge smiles arrive on my face. This has been going on for months. I just feel there's a new connection. But the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit was really a big deal. It was amazing when I went there, the feeling, I didn't know what to expect. I'm certainly not one who's going to be intimidated by any audience, but I didn't know what to expect. And in the conversations that I was having, it just connected, and I felt like, wow, I just arrived in a place in which I've been struggling to find others. They're there, I just hadn't found them. Right. And it was a really big moment. And that's when I said, all right, we're heading in this direction. I certainly didn't know I was going to go down the path of being certified. First of all, the program didn't exist then, but it wasn't what was on my mind at the time. But it was a big pivotal moment. And the first evening before it started, there was a group of about 6 of us, 5 others. I keep in touch, not like I plan it. I keep in touch with all 5 of those people. One of them just authored a book, and she has an amazing company and had the greatest odds of anybody you can imagine with a company. We thought COVID was challenging. This person would not give up. Her resilience was incredible. When I heard about her story and how she engaged all her stakeholders to solve this huge, mammoth, millions and millions of dollars worth of problems happening every single day, I knew it could be done.
Wow, that's impressive. So I can go so many different directions from here. So, I mean, with that light bulb moment, with going into your conference, I mean, to become the 7th certified coach within the organization is a huge achievement. I mean, talk to me a little bit about, if profit isn't that purpose of a conscious business, then, what is?
Well, every business, we're out there to solve a problem. With conscious companies, they're not only looking to solve a client problem, they're looking to solve a much bigger problem. They see a responsibility, how capitalism can be used. So the big question comes up, the problem that most companies solve rarely impacts society in any way, and rarely impacts planet. There is the possibility with a conscious company, think of it a lot like a business model. You're bringing all of the pieces together. This might be a good time almost to compare it to, I'll use the acronyms for those who know it. Some of them are quite familiar, but ESGs, the United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and then you look at the CSRs. Amazing work happening with all of them. There's quite a difference, though, between the models that they're using, because all of those models are based on traditional capitalism. Those are considered to be initiatives. So here we are running a company today. We could still be harming the environment or doing something to make money. And then we choose to take some of those profits and give them away. So it makes us feel good because we think we're doing something great.
Right.
In a conscious company, you're actually now doing good all the time. Ironically, you can make a lot more money. You can make actually up to 400% more documented repeatedly. Yeah, it's not small money. It's very significant, but you're operating it as a business model. So I like to kind of compare and contrast. In a traditional model, it's traditional capitalism. You're focused on your shareholders, earnings per share. In a conscious company, you're focused on the purpose and how you're going to elevate people. It's not. Sometimes people say, well, it sounds like socialism. Believe me, it's nothing like socialism. Believe me, it's capitalism.
Right.
Using capitalism as the most powerful way of being able to write the system. Let me tell you, it's going to be highly profitable. But if you do it for the profits, then it doesn't work because you have to do all the right things. The profits ensue. They come about. And now you create a sustainable company that could literally go on under great leadership for centuries. I mean, there is no reason it should end. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I was doing a little bit of research myself, and one of the terms I came across, which I didn't really understand, so I'd love you to explain it a little bit more, but talk about stakeholder orientation.
Sure. So stakeholder orientation is the view in which all stakeholders, you can continue to help each other create new value. Stakeholder orientation, in order to do that, we look at ethics. One of the workshops I've recently been doing is around ethics, and there's a lot of confusion. When we look at ethics, it's very hard because we have personal ethics, we look at the business, but at the end of the day, ethics are all about humans. So when we look at developing stakeholder orientation, we look at our stakeholder groups. If we have a really big problem in our business and we want to solve that problem, or maybe it's a strategy that we're heading down, the more stakeholder groups we can get involved for them to be able to weigh in and to help us create value for all customers. But while doing it, they might in turn be creating value for us. That's the real magic that happens. That's what got me starting to think about what would the pandemic look like if every company had already been, for a decade on a conscious path. I have a feeling how it would have looked here in America if we were just looking at American conscious capitalism as global. In fact, there's a lot of interest now in China as well. But when you take a look at it, what would it have looked like? I think us living through this pandemic, because it's certainly not ended, living through this pandemic would look substantially different, and our reliance upon government would have been very different. In fact, I would even question whether or not we would have needed all the stimulus money. I know we wouldn't have. Actually, I could pretty much show that wouldn't have been necessary.
Okay, I love it. So thinking through in my head here, you have a leader, CEO of a company, you start reading some books, he finds out about conscious capitalism, as you and I probably both experienced, we have owners, CEOs that go to these conferences and then come back to their company and they say, okay, we're suddenly going to do this. And, they roll their eyes, they think, oh no, another one of those initiatives. But how, what do you obviously go into companies and you help implement that within their companies. And change their whole mindset. But how do you usually recommend in just trying to get that, everybody in the company to buy into what this,
Right.
new version of the company looks like?
Yeah, so there's a case study that I've published many different forms recently on a company outside of Boston, and it would be the same approach. And the approach is companies have opportunities, they have issues, there could be challenges that are not so great, or could be something else going on. The way to approach conscious capitalism can be to continue to educate leaders and others on conscious capitalism, but it isn't like saying, okay, let me walk in with my binders. Now we're going to implement conscious capitalism, right? That was the old days. We used to joke about that with accountability. Come in with a pile of books and slam them on a conference table. Now we're going to talk about accountability.
Right.
What we're really doing is conscious capitalism is a tool for many companies to begin to make the shift, have a business challenge. So I'm right now pitching to a company in Atlanta, $1.2 billion publicly held company. And they've got some real challenges in this company. And in that particular scenario, we're going to be talking about those challenges and how they could use new novel approaches that will make them relevant. And a big fear I know you and I have as leaders and being entrepreneurs, we fear lack of relevancy for ourselves. That's a big deal. Well, one of the ways to stay relevant is to be looking at what are the new ways in which progressive companies and companies that are doing extraordinarily well solving these problems. So at the end of the day, it's a problem. How are we going to solve it? When we begin to move in that direction, we also begin to learn perhaps that the culture isn't working as well as it could be. Instead of saying, let's go do an entire culture overhaul, let's find out what's not working about it. I use some approaches that not everybody uses, I'll be honest. I'm very much about essentialism and triaging. Right. I want to find out what that real thing is and get really, really deep and find out what that one thing is that if it's done can sustain and have the biggest impact. Once we get that going, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? So I'm really not one who likes to go like build this thing conceptually and then go involve the conceptual. There are others in practice who will use the alternative approach. I don't think it's as realistic. And frankly, I think most entrepreneurs would look at me and say, no way.
Right. Yep. No, I can see that.
I don't see that.
So when you talk about leadership, and what typically are the main characteristics around a conscious leader? I mean, do you find more males, females? What type of characteristics do you see there? You're obviously exposed to a lot of them.
Yeah, well, conscious leadership is going to come from a place, first of all, where someone is in a growth mindset, and not a growth mindset as in trying to make more money, but simply as a growth mindset. They're open, they're nimble, they want to learn, they're very, very much about learning, and they understand themselves well. And they're also smart enough to know that learning is going to continue. Emotional intelligence development is a really big piece with being a conscious leader. And there's certainly a number of attributes. Being transparent supports a conscious leader. Authenticity, it's interesting. Things like executive presence, which used to be really important. It's not to say that a leader not having executive presence is good or bad, but simply it's not as important for a conscious leader. Conscious leaders understand humans and they're heart-centered. So as they make decisions based on not just feeling, but is it heart-centered? Am I actually looking at my stakeholders and am I holding them up and helping them? And are they helping me? Mm-hmm. That's a way that leaders begin to look. When I think of the real power of all business, it doesn't matter what a business is about. I think that the real power of business is about creating new value. And the more new value created eventually turns into innovation. We have a lot of challenges in this world to solve. If companies were focused on solving those challenges while serving their customers, their clients, whoever it may be, their internal stakeholders, we would be accelerating much faster in a positive way, in a way that humans connect with it. The truth is, employees more than ever want connection to a company. I've got an article coming out, so I've done a lot of research recently on
Right.
that globally. And yeah, the pandemic has definitely shifted. All of this was happening, and I have to say it was already happening. The pandemic has made some acceleration. I shouldn't say shift. It has shifted it faster, but it's really, better word would be acceleration. It's accelerated the aspect of we want to work for a place in which we feel good about working for. We don't want to just be here putting in the time, collecting our paycheck, and being seen as another person who's simply producing to make more money. Those days are numbered.
Yep, that makes sense. But do you feel as though it helps retain employees who are embracing this movement, and then, does it also help attract employees to companies that have this purpose? Because you and I probably see all over the place with our clients, a lot of people are really struggling to find people. And if companies have that some type of a vision or purpose that means something to them, then they're more likely to choose that company over others.
People are choosing, as you can see it with some of the big brands, they've made decisions as to where they want to spend their money. People, when they're looking for employment now, are looking more closely at what companies have a culture in which it's a really robust culture. Again, it's not the perks. Many companies have been noted over time as the best place to work. And yet, when you really examine their culture and you do some real interviews, because we've been involved with some, we've been asked to consult. And what you begin to find out is there is an aspect of short-term interest, and it gets exciting, but it doesn't sustain. And it also doesn't create great relationships internally with other stakeholders. So when you begin to change to a culture of kind and caring and have this immense trust, a culture of growth, learning, developing, growing, that it's okay to make a mistake. Obviously, keep making the same mistake isn't okay. Mistakes are about learning. When we begin to learn and we give people that ability to do that is when they start to open up and they give us the very best. And then sometimes in the most unpredicted places, we begin to see new value created that can consistently be executed upon to customers. Those customers are now getting more value. It's helping them grow their organizations, support their personnel, do the good work that they're doing. And oftentimes you tend to attract companies, employees, clients, suppliers, others to work with you that have something in common. So now you're really working all together.
No, that's great. I mean, do you have any, you may not be able to share this, but any sort of good examples of companies that have really embraced conscious capitalism, or give me an idea of just what you've seen in terms of either, the benefits you've seen by a company that's really embraced it over the last few years in terms of either their growth or maybe it's just their employee retention. I'd love to hear some good examples.
So one of the best examples that I can share would be Interface. Interface, now about 25 years ago, Ray Anderson was founder and CEO for a number of years. He unfortunately died a few years back, but he was an extraordinary entrepreneur. But he was in the carpet business. I can't think of a more filthy business and a business that destroys the planet, and he was the first to admit it, than carpet. He had an entrepreneur, an executive within his organization that had been studying up on in climate change, and he was very, very concerned about it. He spoke with Ray. Ray went out, did a whole bunch of research in rapid fire. I would say that he basically drank the Kool-Aid really fast, and he tried to convince his team that it was the way to go.
Right.
In this, and I'll share some more on this, but I want to keep going in the direction of the question. What began happening is the first thing they wanted to do was to get to zero carbon within the environment by X years. So they gave them, I think, 15, 20 years. I should remember the number of years, I don't, but gave them a long period of time. Once the executives came on board and started playing with it, some extraordinary things happened. Now, they changed their purpose. They were clear what they were going to be doing. There's nothing more clear than we're going to be zero. We're not going to pollute the environment. I don't know how we're going to do it. And one of the big breakthroughs in the company was the carpet tiles. They're really the one who made carpet tiles that reduced waste. There's just a ton of benefits. If you've got an area the carpet doesn't work, you pull the tile up, you replace it. It doesn't use that nasty glue. But the entire, not just executive team, the whole company was energized about this. By the way, those carpet tiles were discovered by being in the woods in the fall time with leaves dropping from trees. And there's a long story there. In this particular organization, they achieved their number faster. First of all, nobody thought it was actually possible. So they were working on the impossible with faith. They could make an instrument, a big, big difference. Once they got to this number, then it was now we're going to go beyond zero. There's another whole story there. I won't go into it, but I can share how you can find out about the story. So going beyond zero meant this past year, they introduced carpet tiles that actually carbon from the air, your office or outdoor, doesn't matter where the carbon is. It actually sequesters, I think is the terminology they use, the carbon. And now they're, on an amazing new journey. They're about 100 months away from that being, from their new benchmark being completed. They stand out as an extraordinary company, not just in their industry, but they started on this journey before anybody knew what conscious capitalism or anything was about. They built the model. They are an example. Nobody has been able to say, okay, I'm going to use that same model, but they built a model and it's extraordinary. Later this month is the next month, I don't remember, is the red carpet showing of the film Beyond Zero. And I will be there for the red carpet showing. I'll be with the mayor of Atlanta and all the,
that'd be awesome.
Several of us who are involved in the movement are working closely on this. And it's an exciting time. It's a great example of a company living it. I'm going to just mention some other names so people can identify with them. Of course, Whole Foods, Container Store, REI, Chobani. You want some EO members? Darn Good Yarn. It's a great one. I do a case study. I've done a case study out of Albany. Many organizations have really begun to understand that running from a conscious model is not only the right thing to do, it also ensues tremendous benefits. And as an entrepreneur, they're leaving the most amazing legacy ever. There's just no better legacy.
Yeah, and it sounds as though probably one of the biggest reasons for success is all of their employees getting behind it, getting behind that movement. I mean, you obviously can get, I use bike racing in a lot of my coaching examples where, you have their casual cyclists who you go down a bike path and they're all over the place, where you have that peloton and the Tour de France that are all completely aligned. They're all know where they're going, and they get all further and faster. So
it is. It's like geese, right? The interesting thing is sometimes the leaders will be a little bit not moving as fast as the employees. The employees in a company that has this intense purpose, and there becomes even exercises within the organization to help employees discover their own purpose and the alignment with the company, you begin to see extraordinary things happen. In those organizations, rarely are there what we would call traditional job descriptions. Employee handbooks don't look like they do. You don't hear about legal agreements. They're very, very, very different in feel. And I can't, it doesn't mean they don't exist in some form, but instead, they're about how to do your job. They're not restrictive. They're very much D&I oriented. They're about collaborating and celebrating each other. So employees celebrate and move each other up, but in that intense creating new value, that innovation, that not having that fear of making a mistake means that they begin to grow in the organization and take the organization in places that it may never have imagined. And that's magical.
Yep, that's pretty cool. So, of our thousands of listeners going to be checking this out, and suddenly they're now inspired. I need to learn more about this. I can relate to, big companies like Whole Foods or whatever. And what would be the start of that journey? I mean, is that they get in contact with yourself? Is there a book you recommend? I mean, I want them to contact you anyway, but how do they start that journey?
Yeah, there's several different entry points to begin to learn more. One of the places to go would be to read Conscious Capitalism. It's a great book. There are other books, certainly Conscious Leadership. Any of the books that John Mackey is author of both those, but one of the names I would look for in books is Raj Sisodia, Sisoda. He is the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. He's contributed to writings with people within the movement or simply have a conscious company and have learned about the movement, like Bob Chapman. There are some extraordinary readings available. There are some that I think totally missed the mark. So I do say look for Raj Sisodia's name. That one definitely doesn't miss the mark. The other thing is there are conscious capitalism chapters in various places around the globe. I happen to be on the board of the Boston chapter. I'm very involved, of course, with Conscious Capitalism, Inc., the organization. And then, yeah, reach out to me. My approach is, conscious capitalism isn't one of those things you just sort of throw up on somebody and tell them all about it. Right. The best way to have a conversation is, I'm having this challenge. What would you do from a conscious point of view? How would conscious capitalism approach this? So to take more of a situation like recruiting right now is a big deal. Came up twice today, and I mean, it's a really big issue for a couple of companies. I'm talking, it could be a real problem if they don't get it solved. And, and there's a lot of dynamics. It isn't because they have bad culture. There's just other dynamics going on. There are solutions that are not the solutions that come out of the traditional playbook and toolkits. So, that's what I generally say to people, come to the conversation with something and we talk through it. And through that, it's a way of learning. I believe that conscious capitalism is about learning like anything else. It's not about being an expert in it. It's about learning and doing and experimenting. But it isn't something you can do out of a book. I will say that. Yeah.
So how do people get in touch with you? Do you have a LinkedIn? Is it email? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yep, LinkedIn has become much more popular. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But on LinkedIn, it's Kent Gregoire, Gregoire, Kent Gregoire. Our company website is symphonyadvantage.com, SYMPHONY, Advantage, ADVANTAGE.com. And or it's Kent@symphonyadvantage.com. But it would be great to hear from people. I enjoy the conversations and seeing if there's an opportunity for that individual to grow, whether they do business with us or not. The most important thing is to continue to introduce entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs to conscious capitalism and help them have a journey that's amazingly rewarding and to leave the kind of legacy that they that will mean something to them and the people for generations.
Cool. Well, thank you, Kent. Really appreciate your time today. I love your journey. Been following your stuff for a long time and really appreciate everything you do. So thank you, Kent. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and we've got some great takeaways for your business and your personal life. This is Robert Clinkenbeard along with David Anderson, and would love to get you and your friends to join us on our journey. 2 quick things before you go, listeners. Check out our website, thecommerciallandscaper.com. You can subscribe, you can share with your friends, but more importantly, check out our sponsors. We have Site Recon, who are going to help to capture measurements on your property and create a really streamlined process. And we have Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.